You know, those misunderstood guys who applied for the job without any background.
The interviewer said, laughing while fanning his face with my resume.
If you're that desperate for money, try solving this problem.
He began writing a math problem on the whiteboard.
Solve this, and I'll give you $1 million.
He must think there's no way I could do it, having no education or work history. Seeing the interviewer so full of himself, I couldn't help but smirk inwardly. Taking out a notepad and pen, I asked, "Is that $1 million in cash or direct deposit?" The interviewer must have thought my comment was a futile struggle.
Whichever you prefer.
He said with a loud laugh. He didn't know what I was writing on my notepad or what was going to happen to him. I am John Murphy. I'm a 23-year-old and part-time worker. I work at a game development company doing debugging, which means finding bugs in games. Finding bugs might sound cool, but the actual work involves controlling the protagonist to repeatedly open and close the same door, asking the same character the same question over and over. It's just repeating these simple tasks for hours on end. Bugs, in other words, are insects. Debugging originally means removing insects, but as a part-timer, I don't remove them. If I find and bug, I report it to a full-time employee, and my job is done. I move on to another action and start the endless hunt for bugs again. I've been interested in games and computers since I was a kid. Both of my parents are from a landlocked county in the countryside and were always worried about me staying cooped up in my room, playing alone. On weekends, they often took me to mountains and rivers. However, I was terribly afraid of unfamiliar insects and slimy fish. I used to cry and refused to touch them, and my dad would always scold me.
Stop whining like that. What kind of man are you if you can even touch a bug?
I never understood why he got so angry. Whether I'm a man or not, I hate what I hate, and besides, not being able to touch bugs or fish has never been a problem in my life. Once I said that, my dad scolded me more than ever, and after that, we never went out as a family again. As a kid, I was happy I didn't have to touch bugs or fish anymore, but now that I'm an adult, I feel a bit guilty about it. Saying whatever comes to mind is a bad habit of mine. For instance, in elementary school, it was popular among the boys to flip up girls' skirts. The girls who were targeted would get angry or cry, and I just couldn't understand why the boys would do such a thing.
Why do you do something so pointless when the girls clearly hate it?
Because it's funny.
Funny? How is flipping up skirts funny?
Oh, I get it, you're trying to be popular with the girls. If not, go flip her skirt.
No way, that's meaningless.
I was left out by the boys, and girls were more incomprehensible to me than boys. During breaks, they would go to the bathroom in groups on purpose. They would put on makeup before coming to school and get scolded by the teacher. I never understood why people do meaningless or inefficient things. That's why I was disliked by those around me in elementary and middle school. So, in high school and college, I made an effort to speak only when necessary and kept my opinions to myself. I wasn't disliked anymore, but I still felt like I didn't belong anywhere. After graduating from college, I got a job at a stationery manufacturer. I hadn't done well in school, but a company is a place to make money. The more efficient, the better, and I thought if I could be useful in that regard, I would surely be appreciated. Right after joining, I offered various opinions to my boss and seniors. Isn't this process unnecessary? This factory is cheaper and has a quicker delivery time, so it would be better to place orders with them. I just thought it would be good if we could increase sales or make work more efficient so everyone could have it easier. However, I was scolded by my boss and seniors, being told, "You look down on people, don't talk as if you know everything as a newcomer," and I began to receive overt harassment. Eventually, I resigned after about a year, and now I'm doing a part-time job hunting for bugs. It's a boring and dull job, but I think it probably suits me better. Whenever I think and speak up, I end up making others feel bad. I guess I'm just like the bugs hidden in the games. I'm home.
Welcome back.
When I got home, my mom, who was cooking in the kitchen, greeted me with a smile. My dad, sitting on the sofa, didn't say anything and just drank his beer. When the meal was ready, we all sat down to eat.
John, how's work?
It's just normal as usual.
Are you job hunting? You can be a part-time worker forever. I won't be able to work forever, you know.
It's still fine. He only left his last job not too long ago.
It's because you spoil him. When I was 23, I worked hard every day from morning till night.
My father indeed worked harder than anyone else. As a child, there were many days when I didn't know when my dad left for work or when he came back home. Even when we used to go to the mountains or rivers on weekends, he lived such a life, so he must have been incredibly tough even in his younger days. From such my dad's perspective, I must look very disappointing and unreliable now.
John has talent. There's no need to rush.
I don't have any talent. As soon as I said it, I felt embarrassed, like a child going through a rebellious phase. The next day, I was searching for bugs in games from morning. While working, I remembered what my father said last night. Of course, I knew that I couldn't go on like this forever. But I couldn't help thinking that if I started a different job, it would just be the same all over again. That made even searching for job postings online feel daunting, but I knew I couldn't keep saying that forever. It was while I was caught in this loop of farts that an employee suddenly called my name as he entered the room. Yes, what is it? Worried that I might have made some mistake, I hurried over to him, and he walked me out of the room looking more flustered than me and said,
"Your family called. Your dad has collapsed and is in the hospital. You need to hurry there."
"What? Okay, I got it." I grabbed my belongings from my locker and rushed out of the company. Dad has collapsed. Why? What caused it? An illness. All sorts of unpleasant farts swirled through my mind as I stumbled into his hospital room. Dad, wearing something like a blue examination gown, was sitting cross-legged on the bed and yelled at me as soon as he saw me. "What are you doing here?"
Be quiet. We're in a hospital.
I felt all my energy drain, and I slumped into a chair for visitors. "What the heck? I rushed here thinking you had collapsed, but you're perfectly fine."
I just felt a bit dizzy, that's all. I told your mom there was no need to say anything. She tends to overreact.
After that, my dad gave both my mom and me a lecture, almost identical to the one from last night. Watching him, I felt relieved, thinking he looked like he could go on without any issues for another 50 years. "So, can you go home today, Dad?"
No, they say I need to stay for some tests. I'll be staying overnight.
I see. Well, it's good to get everything checked out while you're here, especially at your age. As evening approached, it was time for visitors to leave the hospital. My mom must have been tired and worried, so we decided to go out for dinner together before heading home. As my mom left the room first, my dad called me back. "What is it, Dad?"
Take care of your mom.
"What are you saying, sounding like a sick person? Let me know when you're getting discharged. I'll come to pick you up."
That's not necessary. Prioritize your work.
Even my dad seemed a bit weaker at the prospect of staying in the hospital. I thought I should treat him to something tasty. I took it easy. That's why I couldn't quite grasp what my mom said through tears at the restaurant. Terminal cancer with 2 months left to live. That was the real diagnosis given to my dad. I've never experienced time fly by so quickly in my life. A little over 2 months passed, and then my dad passed away quietly. After rushing through the wake and the funeral, my mom and I were spending a quiet time together at home for the first time in a while.
John, I know this conversation could wait, but it might be better for you to know sooner. It's about your dad's mountain.
The mountain? What are you talking about?
You remember, don't you, the mountain near our hometown where you went with your dad and me when you were little? That mountain has been passed down through your dad's family for generations, didn't you know?
I indeed remembered driving for hours to the mountain when I was a child, but I had never heard that it was owned by my dad. My mom placed an old, yellow deed on the table.
Your dad said not to pass it on to you, but I think it's better for you to decide.
I knew why he had said that. Inheriting property comes with inheritance tax. I couldn't even imagine how much an entire mountain would cost. I thought about renouncing the inheritance. Honestly, my parents' hometown is pretty rural. Even if we tried to sell it, who knows if there would be a buyer, and as someone who's thoroughly indoorsy, owning it would be pointless for me. I told my mom as much. Then, she said, with a complex look on her face, "There's something I want to show you," and led me to my dad's study. Walking into my dad's room felt strange after so many years. The room was sparse and almost empty. My mom opened the closet and pulled out sleeping bags, a tent, and silver outdoor dishes, one after the other.
Your dad hoped that once he retired, the three of us could go camping again. There are dishes for all three of us. See, he always took care of them on his days off because he knew you wouldn't like it if they were dirty. Funny, right? Considering you're not a child anymore.
The camping gear, although aged, was immaculate. As I looked at them, I found myself crying before I knew it. I felt ashamed for so easily considering giving up something that meant so much. I imagined my dad caring for the tent and dishes for my sake. Crying like a child, I decided I would definitely inherit the mountain. When I told her, my mom cried and smiled happily, nodding in agreement. The next day, I started searching for mid-career recruitment opportunities and sent out my resumes. Considering the future, I wanted a job with a higher income, but I lacked both educational background and work experience. I thought I shouldn't get my hopes too high, but to my surprise, a large IT company I applied to on a whim informed me that I passed the document screening. I wore a suit for the first time in a long while and headed to the company for the interview. The waiting room had a long table and chairs neatly arranged. I had assumed I would be the only one interviewing, but a young woman in a suit was sitting in the corner of the room. I sat as far away from her as possible and tried to relax by taking deep breaths repeatedly. The woman noticed me and turned around to ask, "Are you here for the interview?" Feeling even more nervous around a woman, I managed to say, yes, that's right."
I'm glad. I thought I was the only one and was really nervous.
Whether it's just you or both of us, I don't think it makes a difference. We have to take the interview one at a time anyway. Right after I said it, I regretted it. I felt like I had said something unnecessary again. However, the woman dismissed my concerns with a bright laugh, saying, "Oh, you're right. That was a silly thing to say."
I'm Mary Johnson.
I am John Murphy. Mary Johnson, the woman who introduced herself, was 2 years older than me. She had been a system engineer at another company and applied to this one for skill advancement. I had never spoken to women before, but Mary didn't show any displeasure even when I fumbled, understanding what I was trying to say. Thanks to her, the conversation went smoothly.
Were you SE at another company before, John? Or did you do freelance work?
No. I just made games and apps as a hobby, never professionally. I know all the programming languages, so I thought maybe I'd have a chance. She laughed, saying, "John, you seem serious, but you joke around too." Eck, did I say something funny?
Because knowing all programming languages is quite a statement.
Sorry, that was an exaggeration. I don't know every single one, especially the ones made by individuals. She tilted her head with a smile. I admired her feminine gesture.
All of them? You mean you actually know all of them? I mean, no offense, but there are over 200 programming languages, you know?
Well, I was about to say when the door opened and Mary was called in for her interview. She answered energetically and left the room quickly. About 10 minutes later, a male employee came back and called for me. "Excuse me, may I come in?" Entering the room, I saw 3 interviewers seated in front of me. The men on the sides appeared to be in their early 30s, while the man in the middle seemed to be about 40. He wore a slightly flashy outfit, a brown suit and an orange shirt. He gestured for me to take a seat.
I am David, the interviewer. Don't worry about the 2 people on either side of me. We have a rule that we have to do it in 3s. You know, you shouldn't respond to the interviewer with a huh. Are you here just to kill time?
No, I'm sorry. I apologized quickly, feeling like I had just encountered someone unpleasant. However, I realized the significance of making it to an interview at such a big company without any real background. I wanted to make the most of this opportunity.
So, I told you, right? People who are part-time workers just aren't cut from the right cloth. They wouldn't be doing that sort of thing if they had any sense, right?
The young employee sitting next to him, slapped on the back by David, awkwardly smiled and agreed, "Yeah, you're right."
You're Jack Murphy, right?
"No, I'm John."
Oh, right. I graduated from Harvard, you know. I am from Harvard and entered this company, and now I'm a manager. I was managing dozens of employees and running this company. Since I'm conducting your interview, you ought to perk up a bit. I'm busy, you know.
David spoke for a long time alone, boasting about his career, bad-mouthing his employees, and being sarcastic towards me. As I listened, I wondered if Mary had also been subjected to an interview like this from him.
By the way, why did you apply to our company?
I honestly shared that my dad had passed away and I needed money to inherit the land that had been passed down through generations. Throughout this, David was fanning himself with my resume and yawning.
Well, that's quite noble of you. But, land, what's the point of holding on to land these days? You gonna find some truffles or something?
No, I haven't been to that land for many years, so I don't know its current state.
What? And you're inheriting it? Why?
It's something my dad and his ancestors cherished.
Well, bringing that kind of emotional reasoning here, you might not be capable of the logical thinking required for this job. Are you holding onto a mountain for decades without apparent value, continuously paying for something so worthless? That's quite the quirky family you've got there.
Until that moment, I had been determined to get this job, or at least to give it my all right here and now, regardless of the outcome. I couldn't let my dad down by running away again. I couldn't protect what I had decided to protect. That's what I had been telling myself to keep going. But hearing David's remarks, mocking not just me but my dad as well, something inside me snapped. David, oblivious to my change, cheerfully said, "Oh, right.
If you're so desperate for money, why don't you try solving this problem? Solve it, and I'll give you $1 million. That should cover your mountain's inheritance tax. Probably more than necessary."
David grinned as he wrote numbers and symbols on the whiteboard behind him. I recognized the problem. I smirked internally. I never thought such a thing would come in handy here.
Come on, give it a try. Though I doubt you can do it. You can't start anything in the business world by simply admitting something's impossible.
Pulling out a notepad and pen from my suit pocket, I said, "You're absolutely right. I do have one question, though."
What? You want me to tell you the answer?
Is that $1 million in cash or direct deposit? He must have thought it was just a futile attempt. David laughed loudly and said, "Whichever you prefer." This was when I was in my second year of high school. With no friends, I spent every day working part-time jobs. My mom noticed my concern and she said,
Your dad mentioned this competition, thinking it might be something for you, John. Remember, you had good grades in math back in middle school.
The competition she referred to was the Math Olympiad. Indeed, my grades in math were good, but without attending any prep schools, I was convinced I'd fail the preliminaries. Despite that, I was a bit curious, so I searched for past questions online and studied hard until the day of the preliminaries. Surprisingly, I passed not just the preliminaries, but also the first and final exams. And I was even selected to represent the USA. What David had written was the exact problem I solved at the international competition. Although I didn't win the competition, I was the only one out of 500 contestants who solved that problem. I didn't include this in my resume since it wasn't relevant to the job at this company. Even if I had, David probably wouldn't have read it. I wrote the answer to the problem and my bank account number on a notepad. As I placed the paper in front of David, his smirking face quickly turned pale and stiffened. The two people on either side peeked at the paper and let out a small cheer. "Ah, the number at the bottom is my bank account," Since you said I could choose how to receive it, please transfer it. I don't mind covering the transfer fee.
What is this? You cheated, didn't you?
David's desperate accusation made me burst into laughter. As you can see, I don't have a cell phone or anything with me. All I have is a notepad and a pen.
Don't be ridiculous. Who would pay money for you? This is why I hate idiots with low education. Can't you even take a joke?
Isn't it bad for someone who runs a company with dozens of employees to break promises in front of your employees?
Look, there's no way someone with your lackluster resume could ever pass the document screening for a big corporation like this. You don't get it, do you? I have no money to waste on an idiot who can't understand that.
What do you mean?
I only let you through because I thought it'd be fun to mess around with a loser like you. It was all for my stress relief. There was never any intention of hiring you or paying you. If you're that desperate for money, I'll give you some, so just get lost.
David pulled out his wallet and scattered a few $10 bills on the floor. I picked up each bill one by one and lined them up in front of David. Up until now, I've been harassed and bad-mouthed by many people, but seeing you made me realize I was actually lucky with the people around me. I've never met anyone as selfish and childish as you, not even in elementary school or kindergarten. David's face went from red to purple as he pointed at the door and yelled, "Get out." I was planning to leave anyway. I can't work for someone like you. I left the room as I listened to David tearing up the notebook I had written in. The next day, I was holed up in my room, holding my head in my hands. I had messed up. Despite deciding to give it my all without running away, it all ended up like that. I guess simple part-time jobs are more my speed after all. As I lay on my bed feeling down, an unknown number called my phone. Hello.
Is this John Murphy? I'm William from the HR department of Smith Corporation.
Hearing the company name made me jump up. It was the company where I had gone for an interview yesterday. Thinking of David's face made my heart race, wondering what this was about. The man identifying himself as William said he wanted to hear about the interview and asked me to come to the office. His tone didn't seem like I was in trouble, but honestly, I wanted nothing to do with it. However, I decided to go when he mentioned that Mary would also be there. On the day, I dressed in a suit just in case and headed over. I was led to the same small conference room as before. When I entered, Mary was already there. Across the long table, sitting opposite, was David with a sulky face and a well-postured man in his 50s standing. The man saw me and stood up straight, pointing politely to the seat next to Mary and said, "Please sit here."
Both of you, our David has behaved very rudely. We've asked you here today to apologize and to confirm the facts.
The man who had called me, named William, was this gentleman. According to William, after the interviews with me and Mary, David had boastfully talked about it to his colleagues. Knowing David, he probably said whatever he wanted. This talk somehow reached William, David's superior, revealing that David had conducted a stress interview. I looked at David, thinking he was truly a deplorable person.
We've heard most of the story, but we'd like to hear the details from the two of you. I'm sorry to make you recall unpleasant things.
No, I'm the one who should apologize for taking your time, I said, attracted by William's gentlemanly manner.
I feel the same way as John. Thank you for setting up this meeting.
Mary began to talk about what had happened yesterday. I was shocked by Mary's story. Mary was mocked by David for her work history, denied her character, and made gross sexual harassment comments that even the women in the store at night would rage against. William didn't think it was so bad. He turned his blue face to Mary and his red face to David. Watching Mary speak calmly and firmly without getting emotional was astonishing. Then it was my turn, and taking a cue from Mary, I calmly recounted David's disparaging comments about my dad and myself, and how he said he had only called me in for his stress relief. Midway through, David suddenly stood up, pointing at Mary and me, yelling, "That's a fabrication."
Sit down and be quiet.
Do you really believe these nabodists with no significant educational background over me? They're nabodists.
Enough, David.
William slammed his fist on the long table.
We've received several reports of stress interviews from new graduates. I've also been consulted by your colleagues. I was considering how to address this when I heard about these two. Don't think I am acting without any basis.
It's all lies. They're just jealous of an elite like me and ganging up on me.
William heard this, stood up briskly, and approached David.
Do you not trust these people who want to work for this company and spend much time applying, nor do your colleagues who work hard under you every day? Are you calling them liars?
I was more overwhelmed by William's dignity than David's poo attitude. David seemed deflated, sinking weakly into his chair. William then turned to us.
I am truly sorry for what has happened.
There's no need for you to apologize, William.
Mary said, hurriedly standing up.
No, the misconduct of my colleagues is the responsibility of their superiors. I apologize for making you relive this unpleasant experience. It is entirely my fault. We will deal with David appropriately.
I wondered how David could have turned out the way he did while working under such a supervisor as William. Seeing William's words and sincere actions made me strongly wish to work under him and learn from him.
You might be fed up with us, but if it's all right with you, we would like to invite you for another interview at a later date. What do you think?
I was taken aback by William's words, as if he had read my mind. As I was pondering what to say, Mary asked, could we possibly have some time to think about it? I felt embarrassed but decided to go along with Mary.
Of course. You are both young and talented. You have plenty of options. Please take your time to consider.
Mary might be, but I'm just a part-time worker.
That's not true at all. I've heard from other employees that you solved that math problem. No one else could solve it. You can judge someone solely by their educational background or job history.
William then laughed, patting the slumped David on the back. David nodded slightly. As we left the company, Mary suggested, would you like to grab some tea? Of course, I had no reason to refuse, so we went to a cafe near the station. We got carried away, bad-mouthing David and praising William. I guess I have to be a little thankful to David for giving Mary and me a topic to bond over. Are you going to take the Ray interview, Mary?
I'm not sure. David told me that someone as assertive as me isn't suited for corporate work.
That's rich coming from him. Don't worry about what he said.
But I do see his point to some extent. I do have a strong desire to do things my way. As terrible as his personality and manners are, he's not completely blind to people's characters. So, despite being frustrated by what he said, I'm thinking that maybe going freelance isn't such a bad idea after all.
Despite everything she had been through, I deeply respected Mary for her enthusiasm to turn the experience into something positive for the future. Her attitude encouraged me to make up my mind about what I wanted to do next.
What about you, John?
I've decided to go for the interview. Talking to William today really made me feel strongly about wanting to work with him.
I think that's really important. I will support you.
I'll support you too, Mary. We exchanged phone number and boarded separate trains. Later, I went through the interview again and was successfully hired. When I reported this to Mary over the phone, she was very happy for me. With the greatest nervousness and resolution I had ever mustered in my life, I asked Mary out on a date. She graciously accepted. Then came a whirlwind of days. As a new employee who knew neither right nor left, I was constantly being drilled by my seniors. I also managed to upset clients by saying the wrong thing on several occasions. However, what was different from before was that no matter how much I was scolded, I never thought about running away from that place. No matter how much I faced tasks I was bad at or disliked, remembering my parents, my dad's mountain, and the stash of camping gear in the closet gave me the strength to face them. Mary also taught me a lot about work and handling relationships, and I was both scolded and praised. As an aside, I heard from a senior employee that David was demoted to a regular employee and received a pay cut for 6 months. Additionally, he was made to take the training for new recruits from scratch. Whenever I run into David at the office, he still looks displeased as ever. However, I see this as yet another challenge to overcome and make it a point to actively engage him in conversation whenever I see him. Years flew by in a blur, with no time to breathe, and it was only after several years that I visited the mountain I inherited from my dad. Arriving at the mountain, I woke up my son. He was sleeping in his child's seat. Mary, who changed her surname from Johnson to Murphy after marrying me, laughed at my awkward movements.
Look, Noah, we've arrived at your dad's mountain. Wake up.
Noah, born a year after Mary and I got married, turns 3 today. It was Mary's idea to visit the mountain for Noah's birthday. Holding Noah's hand, Mary and I walked through the mountain. Look, Noah, there are all sorts of insects on the trees. I caught a small beetle and showed it to Noah, but he clung to Mary, shaking his head and crying. Butterflies, grasshoppers, ladybugs. Noah cried, saying he was scared of everything I showed him. I grew increasingly frustrated and scolded him. Hey, you can be scared of everything. Mary told me off, saying that was not the way to talk to him.
If you're rough with him, he'll only get more scared. Children are afraid because they don't understand what those things are.
Taking her advice, I placed the beetle on my arm and brought it closer to Noah, just a little. It's the unknown that scares him. Indeed, that was true. Look, Noah, you can look from there. It won't bite, and it's not scary at all. Noah watched the little beetle crawling on my arm with wide eyes. In that moment, Noah was just like I had been as a child. Everything unfamiliar or unknown was terrifying. I would always say how much I disliked everything, and my dad would scold me harshly. As a child, I never understood why he was angry. Not understanding, I grew distant and even began to dislike my dad. But now, as a dad myself, I understand why he scolded me. He wanted to teach me not to fear the unknown, not to run from things I disliked. With such an attitude, you can protect what you cherish. What I inherited from my dad wasn't just this mountain. He taught me everything about life. Now, it's my turn to pass on those lessons.